Welcome to this final part of this video presentation of B4B for Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains. During this final part, we'll be looking at the end-to-end payables process and how B4B fits into that process to create a bank file ready for submission to your online banking portal. So here the payables process starts within Great Plains, and it's here where we're entering invoice transactions, building batches of transactions, and then posting those transactions using the standard payables functionality. So I've already entered a number of transactions into Great Plains for this demonstration, and here I'm just going to add another invoice using standard purchasing transaction entry. So I'm just going to put in a test invoice for one of our creditors, and here I'm going to put in the invoice number, the document number, and the value, and then post that transaction. So here I'm posting directly rather than posting to a batch. And now I'm going to subsequently create the batch of transactions ready for processing. So here, using purchasing batches, I'm going to create a US dollar EFT batch where the origin is a computer check. And I'm selecting my checkbook, in this case it's Uptown Trust. So now I can go through into the transactions and select the payables checks. So here we've got some runtime parameters on how we want this batch to be built. So we could filter by creditor and so on. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and build the batch for all of the transactions that are pending. So here we've got a batch total. And at this point, we could go through and edit the check batch, review the invoices that have been selected as part of this batch, and then of course we could withhold from there if needed. In this instance, I'm going to go ahead and process my batch of payments. So here, just using standard functionality within Great Plains to build the batch and post those invoices. And then we're going to have a look at one of these reports. So here, Great Plains is now posting those transactions to the EFT checkbook transaction table. And it's from here that B4B will extract those payment instructions and ultimately match them to our bank details. So we can see here a number of EFT payments have been made for a range of different creditors. And here is our report detailing those EFT transactions that have been actually processed. So the next step in this payables process is to proceed directly into B4B. And here you can see I've got a shortcut actually within my Great Plains menu. And I also have a quick link here as well if needed. And by using one of these shortcuts or quick links, it allows me to log directly into B4B. And here we can see we've logged straight into B4B using Windows authentication. So we've launched the application in authentication mode, and then from here we can carry on with the payables process. So the first thing now within B4B is we're going to go to the extract payment function. So if I move into the extract payment function, here you can see there is one runtime parameter that we should consider. And this is a maintenance function from B4B that allows us to clear down any unwanted transactions from the EFT payment table. So any zero or voided transactions can be removed as part of this process. In this instance, you can see that no transactions were encountered. However, it's best practice just to set this to yes each time. We then have the option to validate and extract. And the recommendation is that we always validate the batch of transactions first. And during the validate process, B4B will read the EFT payment table and attempt to match the payment transactions to the bank details for the vendor and checkbook that are held within the B4B system. And by validating the process first, it allows us to identify if there are any problems with any of those payments. And most commonly those problems would be that the bank details for the vendor are missing, they're invalid, or if we're using the approval module in B4B, the bank details may be pending approval. So we validate the batch of transactions first. And here you can see it's moving through the payment table, and now it's given us a message indicating that errors were encountered during this validation process. And here it gives us an exception report of any problems that were encountered. So in this instance, we can see that for shipping specialists, there was 2 invoices. The bank details have been found in B4B, but we can see that the bank details are currently pending approval. So therefore, we can't make a payment to this vendor until those bank detail changes have been reviewed and ultimately approved. We also get a valid payment report. So these are all of the transactions that were successfully validated during this process. And so here we can see the payment format that it's been mapped to, our US ACH module, the vendor code, the checkbook, how we're paying the creditor, so we're paying here by account rather than by invoice, and the transaction amount total and currency. And we can see here there are 3 invoices relating to this particular payment. And if we scroll down to the bottom of the report, we can see some totals. So 1 payment was rejected and 7 in this case were accepted. So 7 payments passed our validation check, but of course we had 1 exception. There was a bank detail that was pending approval. So we should really go and review that and get that approved before we can continue to ensure that everything that we posted in Great Plains will be successfully extracted into B4B. So here I'm logging in as my approver. We can go into the approval module. We can see the change request for shipping specialists. Here we can see the routing code was updated, and we can drill down into the audit data to actually see the nature of that change. So I'm going to go ahead and approve the change and then log back in as my payables user. So let's go back to the extract function and we can validate the batch of payments again. This time you can see no errors were encountered. It's gone straight through to the validation report, and we can now see that all of the transactions here were successfully validated. No exceptions were encountered. And of course these totals should match our batch total and ultimately what we posted within Great Plains. 8 payments have passed the validation. No errors or warnings were found. So it's at this point we can go ahead and continue and now extract the batch of payments into B4B. So this will produce a very similar looking report. And if we're keeping a paper trail, then this is the report normally that we would print out to detail exactly the transactions that have been extracted from Great Plains into B4B. So here now we can see 8 payments were created, no errors or warnings were found, and our payments have been successfully mapped into our US ACH payment module. So the final step for the payables user is to simply return to the main menu and to select the appropriate payment format, and then here we're going to create the bank file. So in creating the bank file, there may be some runtime parameters depending on the type of bank file that's being created. So here we're looking at a screen that's tailored for US ACH payments where we need to put in some runtime parameters. So maybe the settlement date, the day you want the bank to execute the payments. Here we have a reason code. This allows us to construct a payment description that will be included in the bank file and pass through the banking system onto the beneficiary's bank statement. So they have some reason for this payment. They know who it's come from and what it relates to. And there are a number of options here on how we can construct that payment description. And most commonly that would be a fixed text or maybe a fixed text with a combination of the transaction references, so the actual invoice numbers relating to the payment. So here we could put in the payer's company name, your own company name, and then finally the output file that's going to be created. Some additional runtime parameters as required, and then we simply validate those parameters to make sure the information is correct, and then create the bank file. So here we're processing payments. We can see now 8 payments were processed. A file was produced in the designated output folder, and we get one final payment listing from B4B, showing exactly the vendor code, the bank account number that we're paying to, the transaction amount, the invoice numbers relating to that payment. And here within B4B, you can see we've also got remittance enabled. So at the point of creating bank file, we can create a remittance for that particular payment and have that emailed directly out to the beneficiary as well. So not only are we paying our vendors by an electronic funds transfer, but we're also here able to notify them using the emailed remittance document. And we get a report of the remittances that have been created. So for each vendor, a remittance file has been created. And if the emailing system was enabled, we'd see here the email address that that remittance had been sent to. So the remittance document itself in B4B is fairly basic. However, it does include all of the necessary information for the beneficiary. So if we open up one of those remittance documents, so here's a remittance for Ace Travel, and you can see on the remittance document, we can include your own company name, so they know who the payment has come from, the account details that it's been paid to, your internal vendor reference code, and most importantly, the invoice numbers and values relating to this payment. So in terms of the payables process within B4B, it really is a very simple two-step process. Firstly, to extract the payments that have been posted within Great Plains, and to then create the output file. And I can demonstrate how quick and easy that is by just putting in one further transaction and taking that right through. So let's post a new invoice for Ace Travel. And then here we're going to build a batch for that one invoice. I'll select my checkbook again, which was Uptown Trust, and select the transactions, ready for payment, and process my batch. And here the transaction is now being posted within Great Plains. So I go straight to B4B and extract that transaction. So we'll validate the batch. No errors were encountered. It's gone straight through to my payment report. And here's the new invoice that we just entered for Ace Travel, ready for processing. So I'll go ahead and extract. One payment was created. No errors were encountered. This payment has been mapped to our US ACH format. So now I'll create a new file for that new invoice. Create bank file. Change the file name and create my output. So a very quick and easy process on the end of the payables process to produce a bank file ready for upload to your online banking portal. This concludes this 4-part video presentation of B4B for Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains. For further details and information relating to our other products, please visit our website at professionaladvantage.co.uk.